first off, thank you for being here. Really excited to chat with you, Jason. It's always a pleasure. Your insights, your experience is tremendous. So thank you for taking a minute to give your knowledge to the world when we really need it. So thanks a bunch.
Happy to be here.
We're all facing everything top of mind, COVID-19 and the effects on the workplace. That's what's the biggest question right now. So as you kind of big picture view, what do you see as one of the biggest impacts of COVID-19 on the workplace today?
That's like such a big question. We've actually I've been hosting we've been calling them office hours. They're just kind of meetups for people that want to pop in and talk about this over the last couple of weeks. And I can tell you there's been some pretty consistent things that bubble up that sort of everybody's, at least right now, right? That there's going to be different stages we move through, but right now, people are trying to figure out how to enable and set people up in remote work. Obviously, had to send the people that can go home, and most of them have never worked from home, and so figuring out technology and process and policy and that's a big one. So that's one. The second big issue people are concerned about, that I think is a good one to be concerned about, is how do you keep people connected, specifically there's two different sides of that. Number one, connected in the context of doing work. So how do we make sure teams are still connected, collaborating, able to find each other and that. But the other side of that is there's a real concern about the impacts of social isolation, right? If you're, we have data that says we have employees, half of the employees in the U.S., there's some studies that have suggested that like half of employees in the U.S. are lonely at work right now before all this happened. And then you send them home to an empty house or a family they don't really like. And like there's some potential impacts there. So that's the second kind of big issue. And then the third big one is how to deal with the anxiety of uncertainty and everything. So that those kind of are the three, at least big issues that I think are there. And I think underlying the anxiety one is how do you help lead people in this time of anxiety when you yourself are feeling a ton of anxiety? Right. So all of that, like that, I think that all of those things are threats to our ability to do work and get people through this.
Yeah. What's interesting is it's made me think a lot about what did we take for granted when we all came to the office, right? Like there were so many things that we just, if I see you at the office, I can assume a whole bunch of things. You're not dying on your deathbed. No, you probably don't have anybody that's super sick or something that you need to be taken care of. Your kids are probably, someone's taking care of them because it's not your work. Right? There's all of these things that we just assume. And now all of a sudden that's gone. We've the social element of it I'd never heard that stat before. That's really interesting. And it's actually, very, makes a lot of sense that right now we're facing that issue of social isolation being a big component of, because even before in the workplace, I would have assumed that, well, you're not socially isolated because there's people around you, which is, not a good assumption to make.
Well, we weren't doing a good job of connecting to each other before. And so now it's become critically important, and a lot of people don't have the skill set to do, or we don't have the know-how. If we had better relational skills, we'd be better connected already. And so I think that's one of the plus sides of this, is that we're learning, and we're recognizing, like, we're forcing ourselves into doing more check-ins and having more communication and doing more one-on-one touch points. I think all of that's going to be really good, helping us get through it. But I think on the other side of it, we're going to have hopefully a much better, well-connected kind of work experience going forward.
Yeah. And that's what helps me sleep at night is this idea that this too shall pass, right? I mean, we will get through this, not to demean at all the severity of it, but what helps me get through the day is this idea of, hey, we're all learning so many amazing things. There's a group that I was just chatting with. They were on the fence about a month ago whether or not they were going to go virtual or not for their workforce for a strategic. Some of their employees had to drive like an hour and a half to get to work.
Sure.
Which is, that's tough, right? But they're like, we don't know if can we do it? Can we actually could we be successful virtually? Well, yes, the answer is yes, because
turns out yes.
Turns out yes. And I'm very excited to see the results of this push to really learn how to communicate through technology, learn how to connect through technology. Because if we don't, I mean, we talk about having an engagement problem with people in the office. I mean, forget getting better right now. I mean, there's just if we don't figure out a solution to help us better connect.
Right? Yeah, it's interesting that the other data point though that's kind of interesting is that there's some ADP data that Marcus Buckingham was talking about. I remember hearing him first talk about it at HR Tech, and they actually found that when it was an engagement survey globally, they were looking at engagement levels, and they actually found that when certain conditions were in place, that remote people that were working remotely, like a majority of the time, were actually at a higher natural engagement rates than compared to people that were coming into the office. And so I think it's possible, right? It's possible that we actually could, in the absence of all of the anxiety, right? I mean, right now we're dealing with we're not dealing on the same level, but I guess the point is, if you assume the anxiety takes the overall level down to a certain point, I don't think it's a good assumption to make that just because people are at home that they're going to be less engaged, because there's a lot of people that might thrive in this environment. They also have their kids at home with them too, or a lot of them, and so there's a lot of things working against us. But I think again, that's another thing, we might emerge on the other side of this having learned a whole lot about our capabilities of working remotely and what that even looks like.
Which is interesting, because that to me suggests then, which I think we know, right, that if there is that potential of seeing that boost in employees being more productive, maybe even an increased job satisfaction, all the benefits that typically associate with engagement coming from them being to work at home, that says to me, hey, we treat adults like adults, they'll do a good job and they'll be happier about it, and it's almost like we're almost cutting ourselves away from some of those old school management styles that have been detrimental to the workplace for so long. And that's almost a little exciting, to be honest.
It is. I mean, the cost is certainly not worth it, when we're going to look at this in the end. But one of the benefits that I think will come out of this from a world of work is we're getting accelerated to the future of work right now because we've had to, right? Necessity is sort of breeding innovation right now because it has to. And so you're right. Like, that's one of the really interesting things to watch, is how many things that we would have been told 3 weeks ago weren't possible, or like the example of the company you were talking to, like, man, I don't know if we can pull off this whole remote thing. It's scary. Can we actually do this? And it's like all of that stuff is gone. Like we blew through it. Things that we didn't think were possible, things that would take a year are getting done in weeks. And so all of this stuff is breaking down. When we get on the other side of this, whatever that looks like, there's going to be a lot of stuff to put back together. Both on the human side, but also on the work side. When we reconstruct this, it's going to look completely different. There's just no way it doesn't. So that's kind of cool. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that to really do it in a way that is more human oriented than it has been in the past.
I hope.
That's
the
silver lining.
I hope we get there sooner rather than later. Right.
Yes.
Like, let's get to it. So there's we talk about this element of anxiety, right? That's a very real, very serious side effect and effect, a main effect of what's happening in the world right now. And as we look at these transitions, this is a really interesting time to be an HR leader, right? I don't know many HR leaders who signed up for their job thinking, I'm going to have to deal with all this stuff. Like, I mean, this is just, I feel like, a huge expansion on the responsibilities for HR, mainly because I think other folks in the organization are like, well, who else is going to do it? This seems like
what
an
are we
HR
supposed
thing
to do? Yeah.
Right. So what does that struggling HR leader need to hear right now?
Breathe, I think, is part of it. Like, one of the things I worry about in the people that I have been seeing and hearing from and talking with over the last couple of weeks is the other thing is that HR people are people, and we are empathetic and all of that. And there's just so much they're dealing with, their own situation, their own kids, their own life, and the grease fire that is what we're trying to deal with personally. But then they're also carrying that burden for everybody and in their organization. And so the number one thing is like, take care of yourself. Like, you have got to be, caring for your well-being. You've got to be figuring out what it takes to get sleep. You've got to be getting some exercise somehow. You've got to be, self-care, whatever that looks like. That's probably the most important thing, because this isn't going to stop. Like, the cascade of changes and challenges aren't going to stop. And frankly, I think this initial wave has felt pretty heavy, like teaching people how to work from home, supporting people through all this transition. We're going to get all that figured out. But then we have a much heavier wave that's coming, and we need to be ready for that. I mean, people are going to start, you're going to have people in your organization that are sick. You're going to have people in your organization that are probably going to die, or are going to know people, are going to be connected to people who are dying, family members, friends, community members. So there's going to be an enormous burden placed on top of every organization there. HR is going to be the person that has to step forward to help lead us through that again. And so you've got to be healthy. You got to be whole. You got to be ready for that. So take care of you, take care of your team, because you're gonna be called on over and over and over the next 6 to 12, 18 months.
Yeah. That's fantastic, and really, really phenomenal advice. Now, upcoming on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, on April 7th, you partnered with Achieve Engagement to host a virtual seminar. Is that right? What a conference, really? It's a full day.
Yeah. So I've been, as you know, I've been partnered with Achieve to do an ongoing monthly webcast for the last year and a half, 2 years. At the beginning of this year, I took on a little bit more formal role with them. It's a part-time role for me as the Chief Content Officer. And when all of this started happening, I know my own personal reaction, I had a wave of fear hit me, right? Because of just everything, right? The community level, our kids, my business, everything. Once I sort of stared into that, talked about it, acknowledged it, and then moved into like, okay, what do we do? One of the things that I kept asking myself was, how can I lead and how can I help? Like, those are the two things that have been guiding everything. And the one thing that I thought is, like, I know people are going to be struggling. How can we get them, or try to help get them, some of what they need? And so we went to work on this about 10 days ago. We put up a resource page online with stuff that we think is really valuable. There's a lot of noise out there right now, but this is stuff that we think is value curated, and we put up. And then we put together this event next Tuesday, and it's a 6-hour-long online event. Some amazing speakers like Cy Wakeman and Erica Keswin and others that are going to be talking about things that, the stuff that matters right now, leading people through uncertainty. How do you communicate and keep people connected? How do you deal with anxiety? We have a guy that's a clinical, he's a psychologist, has a background. He's going to be talking to us about kind of the psychological side of it. So it's going to be an awesome day of content, and it's oriented towards right now.
Right, and it's free, right?
It's free.
Anyone come and join.
Free.
That's amazing.
It's free for anybody that leaders, HR leaders, managers. I guarantee, I'm really proud of what we're doing, and I'm proud of what we've been able to put together so quickly. And I guarantee that people show up will leave with stuff that can help them right now.
Well, thank you very much for putting that together, especially, that lineup, I'd pay to see a lot of those speakers and hear their content. I mean, this is really phenomenal content. So everybody, if you get a chance, make time. It's going to be worth your while to tune in next Tuesday, starting at
11 a.m. Eastern
11 a.m.
time.
11 a.m. Eastern. Yep. That's right. 11 a.m. Eastern, April 7th. Tune in, and there's just going to be a phenomenal amount of content. Jason, thank you for working so hard with you and all of the people that you partnered with. And we hope that you get a great audience to just spread the reach and spread the love. Service is what we need right now. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining us today on our little video series here. And we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you. Take care of yourself and your family.
Thanks.